Hi, I'm Matthew Reynolds, and I'm here to tell you about Prismatic Jane Eyre, Close Reading, a world novel across languages. Prismatic Jane Eyre starts from some fresh ideas about translation and about what happens to books when they circulate through translation around the world. So let me tell you a bit about these ideas. The first is that translation always tends to generate a multiplicity of text. Now, there are lots of different ways of looking at translation, and all of them get at different things. But one common way of looking at translation is to say, here's a text in one language, here's this other language, let's translate this text into this other language, and then let's compare these two texts together. Often let's judge this translation against the source text. And this approach is revealing in some ways, but it's also got obviously quite a narrow binary focus. Because the fact is that translations almost always proliferate. When a book is translated into one language, it's very often translated into another and another and another. And even within the same language, there are often multiple translations. And in fact, even just one act of translation always releases multiple possibilities that you choose between. So when you're translating something, there are always kind of different choices you could make. So translation always generates multiplicity. And I call this view of translation prismatic translation. And this book, Prismatic Jane Eyre, Close Reading, a world novel across languages, is a case study, really an enormous experiment in exploring this phenomenon. The second idea is that translation is always creative. There's always something interesting to discover and think about in the changes that are inevitably introduced by an act of translation. So of course you can find mistakes, you can feel that one translation is better than another, but those are finally quite narrow approaches to what's going on. And when you move beyond them, what you always find in a translation is, in great detail, a record of what another human being has made of the book that you're interested in, and how they've remade it in their own words. Because all of us read slightly differently. That's obvious, really. What a novel like Jane Eyre is for me is going to be slightly different from what it is for you. And these differences, between people have to be really interesting, but they're also usually really hard to grasp. What can you do? You can go to a book group and have a conversation. You can read a critical work, etc. But these conversations and these discussions always happen in quite general terms. There's always a feeling that actually what it really is for somebody else to read a book is beyond your grasp. But when you read a translation, what you discover is what another person in a different cultural location with different linguistic resources has made of every word, every phrase, every paragraph in the whole novel. And to me that's fascinating. It's fascinating because it allows you to explore cultural difference at a really detailed level. And it's fascinating also because it shows what I call the imaginative potential of Bronte's text, growing and metamorphosing in all sorts of interesting ways. This brings us to the next idea, which is that there's a sense in which Jane Eyre, and this is true of many, many other books as well, there's a sense in which a book like Jane Eyre is not just an English novel, but the novel as it coexists in all the many rewritings in different languages, by different people, in different places at different times. To see a book like this, that's to say, as constituted by all these different versions together, is to view it as what I call a world work. So, the world work that is Jane Eyre encompasses, as it turns out, more than 600 translations into at least 68 languages. But how on earth can you study such an enormous multilingual phenomenon? Only through collaboration. And that's why for Prismatic Jane Eyre, I drew together a fantastic group of collaborators, many of whom then became co-authors of the book, but also with many other people contributing in other ways. And this collaboration has been really exhilarating, with everyone generously sharing their perceptions and ideas. What we've ended up with now is this book, Prismatic Jane Eyre, close reading a world novel across languages. It's enormous, but it's also designed so that you can explore it in all sorts of different ways. You can read it from start to finish, that would be great, but you can also jump into the sections that most appeal to you. It's open access, and it's also open in other ways. It includes interactive digital maps and textual animations, which you can click through to from your screen or use the QR codes to access from the physical book. And it includes lots of different ways of visualizing and understanding the translations, lots of different languages in lots of different scripts. So, as well as being an intellectual adventure, it's also been a publishing challenge. And I'm hugely grateful to open book publishers because Prismatic Jane Eyre really does, I think, push the boundaries of how it's possible to represent linguistic diversity in a book. So please dive in. I hope you enjoy exploring Prismatic Jane Eyre as much as I've enjoyed working on it and putting it together.